Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online, and this is going to be the first EVE Talk of 2021. I hope you all had some really nice holidays, and of course I hope that we can keep up with all of the changes that CCP is planning for the game. We still don't know much, although we got like a little bit of information potentially in the latest dev blog. I'm really curious to see what CCP is going to do. They definitely acknowledged that at the moment the resource gathering potential in the game is set too low for the optimal situation, so we can expect new opportunities to show up as CCP creates new content. But for now, of course, let's focus on what's happening in the market, and specifically because we had another very big battle that happened New Year's Eve, I think it is, and potentially we could have another battle for a second keep start timer tonight. We'll see if they decide to go for it or not, but I think like around 250 titans destroyed, maybe even a little bit more than that. That could have an impact on the mineral market, of course, if those sides want to rebuild quickly so that they can perhaps try to win through attrition when it comes to the super capital game. Very bad timing for me, of course. I just made a video mentioning that just like with minerals, there were still huge stockpiles of supers and capitals out there that would need to be destroyed, and then of course they come out with well, the bloodiest titan fight I think we've ever had in the game. But I think this is very positive. People are also willing to throw everything at each other, and we need that destruction in the game. So overall, yeah, very good news. We'll see if there's more to come. As always, let's take a quick look at the New Eden store before we get started, and we've got yeah, quite a few sales going actually. Ooh, Cursor Sarum skin, that's actually pretty cool. Oasis of Faith skin, ooh, some Rock Biter Pioneer skins for your mining ships, including a bundle. And then we get some hot ones, of course, with the cooldown. I think that one should be over. We'll take a quick look at the services as well. We don't have anything. These are not actual sales, but because you're buying a pack of stuff. All right, well, a couple of sales in the skin department if you want your chance. Next up, let's move on to the market. As always, we'll start with plex and stuff, and that's coming in at 240. Like that. So here we go. Let's take a look at the plex chart before we take a look at the numbers themselves. And very noticeable here, we have of course this volume spike due to a sale in Omega time, which meant that for a moment or for a couple of days, demand for plex increased massively, pushing the price up well above 2.75 million on a couple of days. But that has been absorbed very quickly by the market, and in fact the downtrend before this disruption, you could say, is now continuing on this daily average price chart right after, of course, those 3 days where we had a little bit of chaos, you could say, in the market for plex. So I would say that there is still this worry in the market for deflation. Let's take a look at the player on trade hubs as well. Usually they're competing with each other just below 2.7 million for the sellers, and the buyers are at almost 2.6 million. So still a very narrow margin, but continued pressure down. Not the low point from the summer, which when we went below 2.5 million there, but we're still seeing pressure in the plex market. And this, while it is winter time, we should have pretty high activity with the war as well. A big battle like that should attract a lot of attention. We in fact also just saw a big buying spree because of CCP's discount, and right now you could say that perhaps, right, if enough players quickly fill their Omega time with the plex that they can afford, that you could have a little bit of a slump in demand because of that after this jump. But I feel like it's still a little bit of fear of deflation because ISK creation has also been hit pretty hard in the latest patches, and so as a result, I'm not sure if this is already the right time to jump in on plex. Let's see if this barometer then tells us anything. Actually, no. So what I like to do is also look at multiple pilot train certificates. If those actually start to then slowly go up, you could expect upwards pressure to start to form as well, as you know, these two are in competition, you could say, for Omega time. It is definitely different, a much smaller market, but here we're basically flat on that 5-day moving average, still between 1.3 and 1.4 billion ISK. It's in fact just 1.32 billion for the first seller, and then just below at 1.29 billion for the buyer. So we're really trading right around that 1.3 billion at the moment. The chart is actually showing slightly higher prices, so we must have had a little bit of new supply coming in here that is going to keep pressure on the price and is definitely not showing any signs of a breakout or anything like that in the close future. After that, we get our skill extractors that have that same little bump in price but not in volumes. That is because all of this happened through the plex market, and you don't necessarily get a huge increased amount for skill extractors, but they are communicating with each other, these two markets, and so you get that little bump here. But then at the tail end again, you can see the pressure still mounting on skill extractors on the chart. 301 million ISK for the sellers, 295 for the buyers. All margins very, very close, so we could go either way from here, but the trend at the moment is still to see some pressure on the price here. Let's take a look at the impact on the injectors then. Large scale injectors have gone below 650 million ISK and are just slowly continuing to pull away from that price range on the downside. So we're very close to 1 year low point here. We're talking 642 million for the sellers, 620 for the buyers. That's still a little bit of margin. Some buyers coming in on the market here with 41, 19, 31, 31. I do think that below 620 we're starting to hit some investors that see this as a buying opportunity. But this is now, of course, the perfect storm. Plex is down in price, a little bit of pressure due to the Plex sale, and CCP has been very generous over the holidays when it comes to skill points and before that as well. So as a result, large skill injectors probably not that much needed. Or not that needed in general in the game at the moment. And then there's all the uncertainty as well for CCP. In fact, in the dev blog they mentioned that they were going to continue to iterate on balance changes on a pretty regular basis. And so, you know, are you going to create a super carrier pilot now using large scale injectors when CCP could hit those again with nerfs? Yeah, probably not. And so we are looking at pretty low prices for large scale injectors. That's still relatively speaking, of course. We're still talking 640 million for one of them. Small scale injectors are doing something different. All right, these two markets that I would expect to be doing the same are actually not always doing that. We actually have a little bit of a bounce off of the 130 million mark on the chart. 131 now for the sellers and 115 for the buyers. So I think we should see this as a little bit of a buying spree. Couple of players perhaps deciding on some positions close to 130, and then that gap has been filled very quickly. You can also see that in the last 24 hours we're going down decently quickly from 132.5 to 131 million ISK. So it's going to be a little bit of a bump, which we don't see in the large scale injectors, although yeah, you could maybe see a slight bump here, but clearly we've gone below the 650 and we are here to stay there for now. Our final injector is the daily alpha injector. That is again demonstrating that it is its own market, able to stay above 45 million in the highest range for the year. 44 million for the first seller, 44.6 in Jita, so pretty close here again. 42.5 for the buyers, and yeah, here in last 24 hours, just one buy order. So I'm seeing this as exactly what I've been mentioning over the last couple of weeks and perhaps even months. A strong alpha clone activity in the game with a very nice goal for them. 50 million ISK is something that is very doable, and I guess that they don't even go for a buy order to shave off a couple of million off the price. No, we earn it, we come to Jita, we buy ourselves a daily alpha injector straight from those sellers, and then you inject that, you go back out there, and you have your regular goal to go for. That keeps improving your character, opens up new options. I think it's very popular at the moment, and yeah, doing quite amazing compared to the other injectors for sure. Finally, we've got the hypercores that are flattening out at their current range, probably 280 to 90, yeah, something like that. We do have a big volume spike here all of a sudden. but with no price response. That's a little bit strange. 280,000 for the sellers, 262 for the buyers. What this may be is like some New Year raffles that have been organized. I would not be surprised by that. Perhaps private ones. I think you can set that to like your alliance only and things like that. Or just in JITA with the fireworks, players try to have more stuff happening in the Hypernet Relay because of course the time of the year. I think it's a good opportunity, but it looks like it was actually pretty balanced with supply and demand coming in on both sides, because the increased volumes haven't touched the prices. Next up we have the minerals. That's coming in at 10:30. There we go, and as always we'll start with titanium, where you can see that we have a volume spike. I think that's yesterday or the day before. Timing wise seems to be around the big Titan battle, I think, and we are talking about an increased price to 695, almost 7 ISK. For the sellers of titanium, we've got one seller at 500 million units, but after that, much more muted, 42 million, 75 million, 100 million down here, but selling at 712 and 720. That's definitely a pretty high price, so you don't need that much purchasing outside of this one sell order to bump the price up well above 7 ISK. 682 for the buyers as well, showing pretty damn strong demand. So I think here we could have a bit of a destruction bubble. Now the dream scenario for us miners of course would be that they go for round 2 tonight on the second timer of the Keepstar, or is it final timer, I'm not really sure, and that becomes another bloody battle that would require a lot of replacements, and then demand could skyrocket, whereas the supplies, well, they're there. There's definitely good supply routes happening, but it won't be able to keep up with this kind of a destruction, of course, and that could create a very nice sell opportunity. It's already pretty good. 7 ISK for titanium is a more than reasonable price, almost 7 ISK for the buyers. So even if you're very lazy, I don't think you'll lose that much from just selling immediately to these buyers either. For the pyrite markets, we were plateauing at 20 and we're able to stay there as well. Same volume spike, so I do think there was a little bit of purchasing after people lost their titans, or I would say, I think I read that this was more like alliance titans that were thrown in the mix and not really personal titans, and so perhaps some alliance buying happening here. We're talking almost 21 ISK for the sellers and 1940 for the buyers. 40 million, 50 million, you can see volumes going down quite logically from the titanium volumes, and for a price that's, well, let's say 3 times the price of titanium. I'd say that this is where it should be. Feels quite natural, and a volume spike that hasn't really been that much of a response or seen that much of a response on the price. Also kind of normal for pyrite, honestly. It's never been the most volatile mineral either. And then we get Mexilon. I'm kind of expecting a bit of a jump here as well in volumes and in price as a response, and well, we're not seeing the volume jump, but we are seeing the price response back at a 1-year high point above 125, or competing with that. In fact, 132 now for the sellers, 125 for the buyers, and I think a couple of weeks ago we had a pretty big Mexilon sell order that was basically keeping the price in check here, but you can see the slow increase in price is almost inevitable. Mexilon wants to get to that higher price. It is, I think, the first bottleneck in nullsec. You can mine whatever you want, even in highsec. You're gonna run out of Mexilon first, and so now we've got 132 ISK. Very, very good price. Even historically speaking, I think this is almost double what I would call a regular, normal Mexilon price. So your focus, of course, in highsec at the moment is gonna be Mexilon. Second stage, I think, pyrite, and then titanium. They're probably competing with each other at this point, and overall none of these prices are bad. This is looking pretty good for high-sec miners. After that, we've got our low-sec slash null-sec sources. Here is Isogen, still not breaking out, staying at around the 40 ISK mark. 43 for the sellers and 39 for the buyers. What I do notice here, 100 million, 40 million, another 25, another 26. Let's take a quick look at the volumes on Mexilon. 14, 13, those are the big orders. After that, we're well below the 10 million. So this still, to me, I gotta say that I do have to warn you, of course, I may be completely wrong on that. It still feels like there are old reserves out there finding their way to JITA and to the market, being sold at still, right, start the year at 15, selling at above 40, triple the price that they could about a year ago. So this still probably feels like a good deal to a lot of these sellers. But there could be another part of the equation as well, of course, is that Isogen may be underutilized in the economy in general. I'm not sure what the actual numbers are, but perhaps with what's happening at the moment, it just in regular Tech 1 chips, you just don't need enough Isogen for what's available. Well, I would say what's available on the market. I'm not sure what kind of volumes are actually being mined at the moment. So I'm still holding on to my expectation for Isogen, but I can't guarantee it, of course, and my expectation is that it should be able to catch up to Mexelon once supply demand just comes right out of what's being mined at the moment. So it may still take a little bit of time, but once these volumes in Isogen start to go down to numbers that are similar to or below Mexelon numbers in volumes, we should see a price response to catch up with that, because the historical logical price points is that Mexelon has always been less expensive than Isogen. After that, no, Mexelon, yeah, less expensive than Isogen. Yeah, I was right. Next up, we've got the Inoxium market. That's still very, very strong as well. Started at 250. We're still above 1,000 by quite a little bit. 1,129 for the sellers, 981 for the buyers, and here again the volume logic I think holds true. 5 million, those are the big sell orders. So in between this and Mexelon, that's where I actually see Isogen on the longer term when it comes to the sell order volumes, and thus we should also see a price response that it's interesting that it's really not happening, but we are still seeing 25, 40 million, another 100 million units of Isogen that came to the market 3 days ago. I don't think that's going to be freshly mined Isogen personally. Then we have the Zydrine market moving on to Nullsec, and here another 1 year high point, almost 1400 ISK for the sellers, 1269 for the buyers, almost 1300. I think historically speaking this is even a very expensive Zydrine, and here again another downgrade in volumes, 2.6, 2.8 million. Those are the big volumes for Zydrine. Price response, very nice gains as well over the year, of course. And to end up here with our Tech 1 related minerals, we get Megasite that's just not budging. Historically speaking, Megasite slightly more expensive than Zydrine. Let's take a look at that here. What I'm surprised by is 653 for the sellers and 602 for the buyers. Still a pretty wide margin, but the volumes aren't that unreasonable. 9 million here, 5 million here. Of course, it's bigger, but it's not outlandish. It's not 50 million, etc. There's another 11 here at 724, not 12 million here at 744. So the volumes are there, but I wouldn't say that this is like a massive backlog of Megasite. It could really be that there is a supply source. I'm thinking Edencom slash Triglavian, perhaps Wormholes. I don't think so at the moment, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. I do think that there is a Megasite supply that is still online somehow, that is doing better than Zydrine, you could say, and as a result it's keeping the price in check. If I were to be a gambling man, I would put my money on Isogen rather than Megasite for the profits, but also on this I could be completely wrong on that. If Megasite does shoot up from 600 to 1200, you are of course looking at some very nice ISK as well. And then finally we've got the Morphite chart that is just going completely crazy. Started here at 12,500 ISK, and actually this was a high point for the entire year before this chart, where we were below 10,000 ISK for, I'm gonna say, the majority of it. I could be wrong, but it's definitely a sizable time that we were below 10,000 ISK, and we are now selling a Morphite for 73,000 ISK, 69,000 for the buyer. So forced up as well. Very, very high prices, volumes in the tens of thousands. So again, the rarest mineral sees the smallest volumes, has the highest price. That makes a lot of sense to me. And these are very high prices that should have an impact on Tech 2, to be honest. So this should start to keep Tech 2 in check, you could say. We've seen a lot of downwards pressure on Tech 2 ships, but this should become a little bit expensive when it comes to producing Tech 2 stuff. And yeah, you need more fight in all of that as well. So should be interesting. I'm kind of curious now as to the Tech 2 market. One final thing that I do want to note, of course, is that CCP had this dev blog where they showed, yeah, currently we're making a lot less than what would be considered to be a stable or healthy situation for the game. And I definitely feel like on the longer term, Mexlon is in that situation. I don't think Mexlon at 130 is actually where they would want the mineral to be. Noxium, that's on its historical average, so I think that one is still doing quite okay. Tritanium actually recovering back down to less than 7 is pretty normal as well, but I think that CCP will have this metric as well. Isogen, it's still, I'm sure that they have all those numbers. Those are still just too big for what's normally produced of the mineral, and so that's still that historical backlog that needs to be pushed through. But very long term, I would say, I don't expect Mexlon to be able to keep this type of a price range. I do think that this is part of the we're in the worst nerf period, and Mexlon is just so hard to get compared to the demand, specifically from Nullsec, that at the moment it's going for a super high price. But eventually I do think that perhaps new sources or something like that will open up, and that this will find a lower average point then. But for now, yeah, very, very good times for miners, of course. Let's move on then to PI coming in at 2130. It's actually going to be a little bit later than that, but alright. And then, in my opinion, primary casualty of all of that ISK flowing into the mineral market is PI. Basically the reverse of CCP's intent, which was to increase the value and, the feeling of loss of whatever it is that you're putting effort into the game. So that's ISK, that's minerals, production, things like that, perhaps even a little bit less. I don't think that the margins are that hot there at the moment, but yeah, PI is the exact reverse. For me, how I do my PI: come online every 24 hours, activate my extractors perhaps once a month, I empty my planets, and at the moment I stockpile my stuff. And before stockpiling, it was bring it to the closest trade hub and sell it there. So very, very passive, and this is where the ISK is not flowing. On top of that, I've mentioned that before, but perhaps there are some new viewers there for Eve Talk. The PI materials, specifically the advanced PI materials, have been hit by something else as well. It is that CCP has made it more lucrative to destroy structures and more expensive to actually set up structures with the cores that are now needed. As a result, a lot of the player base just has kind of given up on that, myself included. Solo players, smaller corporations have a much harder time keeping their structures up and running. You have to compete with the big groups that, because of all of the mineral changes, want their influence to be felt throughout all types of spaces, and so you just don't have the demand anymore. And then you get a chart like this that starts above 2 million ISK and ends up below 1 million ISK. This is just a perfect storm for very low PI prices, which I don't think CCP minds, because PI is probably the most passive stuff faucet in the game. There's maybe a couple of others, but for its size, I would say it is the largest. So broadcast nodes are now going for 928,000 ISK, buyers coming in at 880. The margin is closing. I do think the market is saying that's probably low enough at this point, but this is definitely, of course, a pretty big loss on the 1 year chart. And it's not just the advanced PI materials. Here are the construction blocks started here at 11,250. I think that's still still a little bit below its average. I would say the high points here are close to the historical average price for construction blocks, has pretty strong demand and was always pretty damn steady, and is currently selling for 8,400, buyers at 7,300. So here still a pretty wide margin. You can see the average prices sometimes at the high end, sometimes at the low end. I still think that more pressure could be building on construction blocks. Consumer electronics, very same story, 11,250 down to 6,250 at the low point. We're talking 8,000 for the sellers, 7,000 for a couple of buyers. So we have some buyers coming in on the market here, but it's just not gonna bring the price back to the historical average or even the start of the year. Coolants straight down for a year. This to me was the surprise story. Not sure if you guys remember 2019 for PI, but after the summer there we had a very bad time. Maybe oversupply was starting there already, and as a result a lot of the non-fuel materials were already going down in price. For all fuel related materials like coolants, we actually had a very strong period all of a sudden. I think people were making more structures, fueling all of them, lots of demand, very good price. So this was a really nice price, 13,000 disc to start the year at for coolants. And then 2020 has been a disaster, I think because of everything that I told you at the start of the PI segment here, and we're just going straight down, cutting the price pretty much in half here as well. So currently going for 7,000 discs for the first seller, 7.3 for most, 6,764, so 6.8 let's say for the buyers. That is of course very cheap historically speaking, and a pretty big downward spiral, and here you've got some plateau periods, at least in some of these others, right, and some attempts to go back, but for coolants it just pretty much straight down for a whole year. And I produce this stuff, so at some point I just decided I'm not gonna sell anymore. We're going to stockpile, and yeah, that's the bad situation. Of course, I've got pretty big stockpiles of coolants ready, so if the price would go back up, don't expect you to be able to sell very quickly, because there's gonna be lots of other players ready to dump all their coolants. And so for the fuel related materials, I'm expecting low prices for a pretty long time, unless CCP comes into the game and, for instance, somehow increases the need for coolants or fuels or something like that. Cryoprotectant solutions are one exception in the PI materials, stuff tied to implants. So here you can see a March-April bubble. That's one of those goods, and you can see, well, we went below 100,000 disc, which is where I would say investments could be made, expecting another implant set to come out. I'm starting to doubt that like a Vorton projector implant set is anywhere near on the horizon, but we really don't know what CCP is planning for 2021 just yet, so it could happen. And here we have the price pulling away from that. 116,000 for the sellers, 107 for the buyers, actually pretty aggressive. And you can see here started at 150, a little bit below that, but we haven't lost that much over the course of the last year. So pretty impressive performance actually in PI tied to implants. Everything else, enriched uranium liquid fuels, again start at 15k, ends up at 7.5, just almost straight down here. We get one little bump in October, but pretty bad year here as well. 8,000 for the sellers, 7,000 for buyers, still a 1,000 ISK margin between sellers and buyers. I would say that there is still thus pressure on this price to continue to go down. Integrity response drones next starts at 2.5 and is currently selling at 1.4. Buyers at half the starting price, almost 1.25 here. So again, advanced PI tied to structures, lots and lots of pressure. Mechanical parts are ball out when it comes to fuel related PI material. Starts at 11k, we lose a lot, but look at the strong performance from February to October, able to defend 10,000 disc for most of that period, and then yeah, the market just couldn't keep up anymore. 7,000 for the sellers, 6,000 for the buyers, so we still again have room to go even lower. Those buyers just want to have cheaper and cheaper PI materials, and I can't blame them. I produce mechanical parts off of 2 planets as well, and I'm not dumping them. And despite that, prices are still going down, and they know that there is just massive supplies out there anyway, so they can just keep lowering their price and grabbing very cheap PI materials at the moment. Nanites, nice little March-April bubble, so that is tied to fuels. Not doing that well, but almost 5,000 for the sellers, 4,700 for the buyers. I would say if there's one place where I would put a little ISK into PI, it would be nanites. At the moment you can buy well below 5k, which for most of the year it's been above that, and if CCP comes out with an implant set or something like that, that should be very good for nanites, and potentially you could get a profit off of that. Nano Factories starts at $1 million, ends at 700,000 for the sellers, 635 for the buyers. So again, that pressure with some exceptions. And sometimes it's probably been speculation on what CCP exactly is going to do. For instance, when CCP first introduced the state, the abandoned state, so they could be destroyed, I thought we would perhaps see more turnover, right, more production, but then they came out with the core, and that of course completely meant that theory was not going to hold up. You thought, well, we'll perhaps see more production as we see more destruction, but people want their structures up and running. Before all of this, what people would do, because they were so cheap, minerals were so plentiful, PI was quite plentiful as well, as a result people would just grab a structure, set it up. If they decide to move somewhere else, they just abandon that structure, move to their other system and start over with a new structure there. But if they kept moving around, the theory was that as stuff got destroyed, eventually it would increase production as well. But we just did not end up in that state. Organic mortar applicator starts at $1 million and is currently selling for 677. Buyers coming in at 587,000 ISK. Recursive computing module had a bit of a slump early on as well, but again 175 million for the start, 1.1 million for the sellers, and 923. So that's still such a big margin. Buyers still trying to drag the price even lower for these PI materials. Robotics, someone actually tweeted, when is robotics going to go back up? Yeah, I don't know. I do think that if you're looking for some real drastic change in the situation, you're looking at a CCP change, and something that could require more fuel could bump up the price of robotics and the fuel-related PI materials. Perhaps the idea of cloaky camping, but I don't think they would use fuel blocks for that, because not a lot of room for fuel blocks in a stealth bomber. But if you're really looking for a turnaround, then you have to look at CCP's news, and you have to try to find a change that will impact the demand of fuels and thus of these PI materials. Other than that, I would not expect any more than a bottoming out of the market eventually, right? Eventually, of course, this is going to stop going down, and this market will bottom out. But it's very difficult to say exactly when that is, because here, for instance, in robotics, right below 80k, and some people probably thought this is a good time to buy. You can see they bumped the price back up, and then we broke that, and again they tried, but they could only bring the price back to 80k, and so here after that, yeah, it just went down to 70k, and we have that same thing. We went below 70,000 discs. Some players thought, hey, that's a good time to invest in robotics. I hope it's not the person that tweeted at me, because they managed to get it back to 73k, and then the market said no, we're going even lower at 60k, and now we even break that on the average price. Yeah, 66 for the sellers, 56.9 for the buyers. So those buyers, they're lowering their price, and they're dragging this entire PI market down, because they know they can do so on this downtrend. Like me for coolants and other PI materials that I produce, I just stop selling, I start stockpiling. But as this keeps going down, that means the stockpiles become larger and larger and larger, and so eventually yeah, they can just keep lowering their price with confidence, because they know that there's still so much stuff out there that is going to squash any increase in price very quickly with fresh supply. There's always going to be people out there that see, oh, we're up 2,000 ISK, time to sell. Get me ISK for my robotics, because I want to get rid of all of that, including some of these traders probably that have been catching a falling knife at 80, at 70, and perhaps even at 60,000. It's a very difficult time if you want to actually get a lot of value out of PI at the moment. Self-harmonizing power cores, nice downward trend over a year as well. A bit of a bounce off of the 1 million mark on this one. 1.2 million for the sellers, almost 1.2 for the buyers as well. Very narrow margin. As I've said, I do think eventually we'll start to see some bottom forming. Sterile conduits though, another picture that's showing right below a million. Yeah, let's buy, but nope. Below 900,000 disk, yep, let's buy, but nope. And again and again and again, stepping down and down and down. Very dangerous to do investments, I would say, in PI, outside of some of those tied to implants, in my opinion. 840,000 for the sellers, 740 for the buyers. Started at 8.3 million or something like that. Yukomi superconductors, here we've got that March-April bubble, so this is tied to the production of implants. You can also see the volume responses. I'm looking at less than 50k for investments, but again, the one type of PI material that is still doing really well. 72,000 for most sellers, 57,000 for the buyers. So remains risky business, I would say, to buy this, but you can see the potential here, right? An implant set comes out, volume spike, and then prices can go 150, 250,000 disc if it's interesting enough. So there is potential, I would say, in this segment. Finally, wetware mainframes, ouch, 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 well below 125. Now you'd think perhaps we have a little bit of support here. I do think investors are starting to learn not to fight this downward trend too much, and here now, yeah, it's just continuing. Start the year at 2.5 million, ends below half the price, almost 1.3 for the sellers, but a million is for those buyers. That's still a 25% margin if you would start from the buyers up to those sellers. That's crazy high. And so this really does show it's no demand, and the buyers know what they're doing. They're saying, you know, there's always going to be some people dumping this stuff, because what are they gonna do with it otherwise? Selling here, very, very difficult to do. And so they're asking a million is for it, where mainframes, which a year ago went for 2.5 million on average. Very, very bad year for PI. And now, yeah, I think unless, as I've said, you're finding some CCP news that is going to change the demand of all of this stuff, a bottoming out is the best that you can hope for. I personally am not going to try to time this market. Next up, advanced wound materials, coming in at 36.30. There we go. Let's, as always, start with the Tech 2 production stuff, which well, has been surprising me a little bit with its volatility. Here is crystalline carbonate, went back up to 160 last week, I think, is now recovering from that, selling for 150, buyers at 140. That is right around the average for this chart, I would say, so not that bad. After that, we have titanium carbide for Caldari. All right, look at that volatility, the range from 140 to 180, so that's not bad. And here, just in the last 2 months, very nice double sell opportunity, nice buy opportunity, sell opportunity again, and we are back down in 2 steps to a price of around 140, 141 for the sellers, 134 for the buyers. So if you expect this volatility to continue, this is a good time to buy. At the moment, titanium carbide is pretty low, but yeah, the volatility is quite surprising to me personally. Then we have our ferrite carbide for Minmatar production that is finally getting out of the slump. I would say that that's good news if you're looking to invest in the Caldari one, because this one was really struggling, but finally we get a little bit of a jump here up to 150. We went back down to 125, but we're working our way back up. 136 for the sellers, 127 for the buyers. So again, I'm quite surprised by the volatility that we're seeing here, and the prices are not like always below average, bottoming out or something like that. We actually make our way back to average and even above average prices from time to time. And then the final one is tungsten carbide for Amar. That's a lot more stable, and this one unfortunately has moved to a lower range, around 150 on average. 150 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers, also showing that these are very different markets in and of themselves, so behaving quite differently. We get Galente, that's actually going back up a little bit above average. Then we get Caldari that shot up to really high prices, the highest carbide related price I think that were available, and is now actually at a low point, so could be investment worthy. Minmatar, also some I want to show that one again actually. Where is it? Here it is, ferrite carbide. Some very nice volatility tied to the war. So here you can see that the player meta can have a big influence because of the Imperium using Minmatar Tech 2 ship as one of their baseline fleet doctrines. You've got this very nice response to player destruction, and then you've got our Amar ones that are a lot more stable and actually just slowly moved to a lower range in the last couple of months. Then the impact on the meta materials. First of all, we're looking at photonic for Galente, also decently stable, basically mirroring the carbides here for Amar. 15k average, pretty stable, and now we're basically moving to a lower average, but still stable. 12,000 for the sellers, almost 11,000 for the buyers. Not seeing a lot of volatility, even when we have volume spikes up to double the regular volumes. Next one for metamaterials is nonlinear for Caldari, and here a different story. The ranges between, I would say, 18, almost 17.5k and 25,000 at the high points. 1, 2, 3, almost 4 to even 5 and 6 times we had this volatility. Very different chart, of course, from the previous one. A lot less stable at a higher range as well. Right now just coming back down from, I would say, a sell opportunity. Buy for 17.5, sell for 22.23. That's pretty damn good, and we are looking at 21.250 for the sellers, 18.660 for the buyers. On the Minmatar one, then plasmonic metamaterials, one big war spike and then basically a moving down to a lower range, also lacking volatility a little bit. 16,000 for the sellers, 15,000 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin here. Yeah, a market that's a little bit more stable. And finally, I think even more stability, terahertz metamaterials. Well, actually, no, not really. Look at how strong it started the first half of the year, able to stay above 20,000 ISK for the vast majority of that. And then in August, summertime, we basically have a move down, losing 25% of its value and currently sitting at 15,000 ISK on average. 15.5 for the sellers and 13.8 for the buyers. Such a large margin between sellers and buyers compared to the Minmatar that we've seen. So very different and independent markets in all of these advanced materials tied to Tech 2 production. Very interesting, and there is some opportunity in there. We are seeing specifically in Caldari, I would say, a decent amount of volatility that is tradable. Galente is starting to show that as well. The other advanced materials, fermionic condensates for instance, have more of a PI vibe to them. Starts at 90k, ends at 60k, not losing half the price as what most PI has done, but a third, things like that, definitely on the books here. Buyers below 60,000 ISK for fermionic condensates. Ferrogel here, same thing. Up to August, right? Really good, holding on to 40k and now moving down to 30k, losing 25% of its value. Fullerite, a little bit different in the sense that it went up above 1,000 ISK and was able to defend that all the way up to August, which was actually a really good price for Fullerite. But then eventually that was a no, and then we went down pretty quickly to a 500 ISK as a low point, but we're not that far away from it. 620 for the sellers, 586 for the buyers. So this is basically that new range that we're moving in. That's well below what we started the year at. Hypersynaptic fibers, went down quite a couple of times to 10,000 ISK here, so was already struggling, and then here again that moved to a lower range. Nano transistors, very same thing, very interesting one. In fact, if you followed through last year for Eve Talk, we had this very nice predictable period where a little bit oversupplied. All right, we were at 5,000 ISK for nano transistors. Anything below that you could easily buy, and then when supplies eventually dried up, right, suppliers don't crash every single market, we actually moved up to 6k very quickly. So very nice and tradable upswings that we had here, even some one opportunity up to 8,000 ISK, and then here again lacking supply, we went at 8k, then a little bit of supply comes in, crashes the price, back to 6k, back down to 5k, but then again after August we are forced to move to that lower range, and now in fact here in December we moved down to even less than 4,000 ISK, 3,750 for the sellers, 3,500 for the first buyer. The margin has gone down though, so here bottom forming could be the name of the game. Phenolic composites, yeah, bottom forming, no sign of that. Again, since August, really breaking the camel's back here and going down to lower and lower ranges and still going down. So very dangerous one here to try and pick up. I think 1,300 for the sellers, 1,200 and below for the buyers. Started here at 2,250. And finally, ceramic fibers, trying to come back a little bit at the tail end here. So also definitely different markets, but the pressure is pretty universal here. 350 for the sellers, 312 for the buyers. Pretty wide margin between these two again. All right, let's move on to Take Two ships after a little bit of water. So Take Two ships at 44.40. Like that. And let's see, that Morphyte price I think should keep Take Two from crashing. Basilisk is belying that right away. Look at that. But where does it come from? This is in a matter of less than a month that we went from 230 million ISK down to 190 for the sellers and 170 just below that for the buyers. 1 year low point, quite a crash, but look at the volatility here. I would dare say, yeah, potentially a buy opportunity. I think I called the same one last week when we went here. So even I do make that mistake. I thought here definitely a good time to buy, but looks like we could go even lower for the Basilisk. Next up, we've got the Cerberus that's landing on 250 and is already slowly making its way back. I think this volume spike is very interesting. Definitely where the downtrend ended. You can see right here on this day we touched 200 million for the average price, big volume increase, and then we started to move up, albeit quite slowly. 216 for the sellers, 198 for the buyers. You're still buying a Cerberus below 200 million, which is not that bad of a deal. I would say if you want that investment, you can make it, but don't go overboard. Buy one of them and be happy when you'll take a profit off of this one. Then we get the Guardian that is slowly seesawing its way to lower price points as well. 1 year low point was at around 160 million, currently 182 for the sellers, 163 million for the buyers. Definitely seeing pressure in all of these Take Two ships so far. The Hound is that the lower range story. Love this first part of the chart. 25 million and below buy Hounds, 35 million sell Hounds. Super nice profit. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. And then of course we actually have our latest situation where I feared the general Take Two crash, but now 25 million could be the high points, 20 million the low points, so we'll lose 50% of the volatility. That's not so great. At the moment we're at basically an above average price, 23 million for the sellers and 20 million for the buyers, showing that demand is just not very strong in the Hound at the moment, so not the best place to buy them in my opinion. But we'll have to see, of course. I still think that Morphyte could eventually start to put the price back up to that higher range here. We'll see how it all evolves, of course. Our exception to the rule, Ichthyosaur tied to the Triglavians, 900 million ISK before we plateau. Just a lot harder to get stuff for Triglavian ships. 924 million for the sellers, 831 million for the buyers. Every single day they are being traded. So yeah, people consider the Ichthyosaur to be worth almost a billion ISK, which is coming close to a Take Two battleship, a Marauder. So kind of crazy, but there we go. It is of course quite a unique thing, that Ichthyosaur, but it's super expensive at the moment. A different story for the Ishtar that is, you know, telling that same story. It lacks the volatility, the Ishtar. I've always liked it as a baseline ship because it does a little bit of everything well. It can be used in PvP, in PvE. You can even make an all-in-one exploration fit, so you can use it to hack data sites, relic sites. You can basically do a little bit of everything with the Ishtar, which meant that it always had pretty strong demand. 100 ships being traded every single day for that one pretty damn easily, and so it had a much stabler range between 230 and 250 million. But here at the tail end again, moving to that lower Take Two range, 200 million for the sellers, 179 for the buyers. Perhaps a little bit of panic as well due to the announced drone changes. So Ishtar is of course the pocket carrier. able to field 5 large drones, pretty damn powerful for the size of the hull, of course, and so very popular for a lot of activities where you could try to have some not too interactive gameplay for EVE Online. And so as a result here, yeah, the Ishtar definitely moving to that lower range as well. The Basilisk has just done so, but too violently in my opinion to say that this could not see a very nice bounce. Cerberus able to hold its same bottom, Guardian definitely lower, Hound lower, Ishtar lower, Manticore also lower right to here. Again, very nice and predictable. 25 million below that for the bottom, 35 million you sell, and then you had another opportunity here, another sell opportunity here. Not as good as the Hound and the Nemesis, if I'm not mistaken, but it's still tradable. And then here now we're just not making those highs anymore. We're losing that volatility, and then actually our low points go lower to 20 million ISK. And so now can we reignite that volatility? That's the real question. 23.4 for the sellers, yeah, 19.6 for the buyers of Manticores. You are buying Manticores below 20 million ISK, which is well below the entire chart, but will that see a big comeback? We don't know. Next up here, the Munin, same thing, right? Well above 200 million. That's trade range, lovely volume spike due to the war. And then of course we start to move a little bit below 200 million, and now it looks like we are substantially below that. And there to stay, less than 200 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. Then we get the Nemesis, which is a lot better again if you're looking to trade, right? Well below 25 million. I think here 22 million, you could make your purchases, sell for above 30, and then here you could do so again. And then we move down to 20, which was actually a tradable move back up, but then of course now we're losing that volatility again, and at the moment we're getting back on a low point, selling for 22 million, buyers coming in at less than 19 million ISK for the Nemesis. So you could try to buy one, but don't expect those 30 plus million sell opportunities to show up at this point. You're gonna have to make do with lower trade margins in Tech 2 for now. The Oneros had a nice little, finally a nice bump after several months of prices well below average, below 180, below 160, even reaching 150. And then now, unfortunately, we're crashing right back down to that lower range. 160 million for the sellers, 140 million for the buyers. Honestly, this looks like a very nice trade opportunity. You even have the volumes for it, but that volume spike is perhaps 30 ships. So this is definitely showing my warning when it comes to the Oneers. I always said if you want to buy one at bottom prices, you can, but don't buy more than one. That's at least not what I would do. I shouldn't say never, but that always felt too risky. And yeah, this might look like, all right, we had like a week to sell above 190, so that profit should be takeable. If you've got a dozen Oneroses, yeah, you're just going to be a part of this downtrend here, crashing the market. One of them, yeah, you could have made a profit. A dozen of them, you're going to lose ISK all the way down. Then we have the Panther, a couple of battleships in here to try and get a feel for the general situation. I would say, yeah, up a little bit, almost 1.1 billion for the sellers, almost a billion for the buyers. You could still see this as a below average for the chart sale since April, but I would say that this is not a bad price. Then we get our Purifier, again showing, look at how good that is, right? Touching 25 million, probably buy prices close to 25 million were the right jumping points, and then you could sell for 35 million once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, almost 40 million on the last one. So good for trading. This is quite amazing. And then unfortunately we break 25 million by quite a little bit, and we start to move in that lower range at unfortunately lower volatility, and now we even are having trouble getting back above 25 million. 23.4 million for the sellers and less than 23 million for the buyers. Scimitar down to less than 200 million, a little bit better in the volumes at 50, but be careful with this one as well. Currently selling for 183, buyers at 167. It is pretty damn low. You're buying well below the entire chart, but again, that warning, don't do more than one, I would say. Then the Widow went up to 1.1 billion on the chart, losing a little bit at the tail end, but still selling for 1.1. First buyer coming in at a billion. I would say production costs, they're not They're not down the drain. They're not like 25% less or 20% less or something like that, which is what a lot of these have moved to. Like the Zealot here as well, right? 230, 250 on average, pretty easily. Then we slump down to 200 million ISK, and now we are at this much lower range, 185 million for the sellers, 169 million for the buyers. So I don't think it's production cost that's plaguing the Tech2 market. It may just be a little bit of a lack of demand at the moment. If I look at these buy orders, that's at least to me what it tends to feel like. But we'll see how it all evolves. Of course, the Morphite jump to me would say that when you spot something like this, it is actually a buy opportunity, because it's not like you can dump basilisks at 180 million ISK and make a lot of profit on your production cycles at this point. Let's move on to the Tech3 ships then, coming in at 54.35. There we go. As always, we'll start with the destroyers, which I like for predictability, I would say. So still moving sideways below 40 million ISK on the Confessor, 41 for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up here. You can see the sell volumes aren't there either. Last 24 hours, nothing. Last 9 days, I would say, 8 days, nothing. So this is a drying up, but the market can take it so far, at least. Still buying at 35 million with these kinds of supplies doesn't make is not that bad of an idea, I think, but we do need a sign that this is going to continue. Then let's take a look at the Hecate. That's at 50 million and able to stay there pretty easily. 50 million for the sellers, 47 million for the buyers. Very narrow margin. Supply wise, not that much in the number of orders, but 62.26, it's a decent amount. The thing is, obviously the Hecate is at the moment drawing a lot of supply, which is pretty good, I would say. The question is, will this eventually crash the price? Let's take a quick look at the Jackdaw so we get a feeling, and this is interesting. We're pulling away from 40 million for the Jackdaw. If we don't see too much supply here, that could be very interesting. 44 for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. Now this is bad news. 700 units waiting at 49 million. Then we've got 100 units here coming in 2 days ago at 44 million. But the fresh supply, it's not there. Just 6 ships in the last 24 hours. They're willing to even sell them within 30 days. They're saying this is going to be a for-sure sale. This is upwards pressure. The Hecate is drawing in all the demand because of the margin. I would say the Confessor is drying up. Yeah, if you can still buy close to 35 million ISK, I think you're making a good deal on the Confessor. This pressure should be untenable. We should move above 40 million, I would say, for the Confessor. Let's see if that comes true. I'm actually going to make like a note of that on my paper here. Confessor above 40 million. 40 million question mark. Something to keep in mind. And then let's take a look at the Zwepel, which last week was going up, and here, look at that, above 40 million for most of the days as well. 5-day moving average, look at that upswing right here as well. 42.5 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers, so they're more expensive than the Confessor, and supply wise just one sell order. It really does feel like the Hecate is able to maintain that stronger demand for some reason, able to maintain all of that supply at the moment, asking 50 million. And I think now it's starting to drag up the Jackdaw, it's dragging up the Zwepel as well. It should eventually drag the Confessor up as well. And so these buy orders to me feel like the right jumping point. You should be able to make a profit on that, unless you know somehow that the massive supplies are waiting in the wings. I don't see a lot of signs for that. I mean, this is a long time now that the Hecate has been able to hover at 50. Eventually this margin should close, of course, right? More supply, it should close. You can even see that the 5-day moving average is showing some signs of pressure, but that should demand enough production and ships that the Confessor should see an upswing as well. On the cruiser front, here is the Legion, went down to 160, slight bounce here, big volume spike happening at this higher range, 170 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers, pretty big margin, supply wise, nothing completely outlandish, should be doable for this market, but again, here I don't dare to make predictions, because it's a weird market. Here is the Loki. That is moving at the 180 million range, 178 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. A full page of new supply, bring the price down from 181 to 178. That's not too much, despite the number of sell orders here. So some careful trading happening, I would say, at the moment. Trying not to crash the price. Then the Proteus managed to make its way up to 200 million ISK. Is moving its way down to 164. Last 24 hours, a full page, but again, they're starting to be a little bit more careful. They don't want to see 130. And finally, we've got the Tengu. That's actually moving back to a higher range as well. 186 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. Now, here I am going to give you guys one theory that it's just popping into my mind, but trying to tie what's happening in Tech 2 with Tech 3. There is a live stream where CCP mentioned that they do probably want to look at the Tech 3 ships because they have lost a lot of their niches to some Tech 2 ships. And so perhaps some traders are already starting to preemptively try to take their positions. They're no longer trading in Tech 2 ships because if Tech 3 then all of a sudden becomes more valuable, able to do more stuff, some interesting stuff that could really drive interest to the Tech 3 market and exacerbate, you could say, the problems in Tech 2. This could be what's happening. I still would always caution you to be very careful in the Tech 3 cruiser market specifically, because it has shown to me completely irrational behavior, like having bottom prices at bottom supply. It just didn't make sense. These bottoms that we had here, specifically in the Legion, this bottom here and this bottom here, there was like sometimes a dozen ships or something like that on the market. Very, very crazy stuff. It does feel like there is a pickup in supply and in demand in trading that's happening here a little bit at the moment. Renewed interest. I think it could be speculation on CCP doing something for the Tech 3 ships, which they have acknowledged have lost a lot of their niche and usage to some of the Tech 2 ships. So that is perhaps something that's happening here between Tech 3 and Tech 2. But yeah, the one thing that I would say I would dare to invest in would be Confessors at the moment, looking at the other destroyers. And then finally, we'll move on to the extra products, 130. Like that, and I'm going to choose just out of personal interest the Vorton skill books, because of course my hope was that eventually I would be able to also try the Edencom ships for some PvE activities and things like that. But yeah, the storyline, the decision from the Triglavens to pull back has basically, I think, shown us that the Triglavens are not going to, in short term at least, become the next race in EVE Online with a full lineup, and that the Edencom would become like the second pillar to that they would have a full lineup as well, that their production costs would come in line with what we already know for the 4 empires and even the pirate ships. Nope, that is not happening. Supplies of this stuff is next to inexistent, and for instance, large Vorton projector skill, 3 billion ISK for the sellers, 3 of them on the market, and people are trying to pick them up for 750 million. I don't think anyone is going to be selling it to these buyers. So 3 billion ISK for large Vorton projector. And then for the specialization, so you can use the Tech 2 variant, a bit more supply, but it's still 1.2 billion ISK for these sellers. Very, very expensive, too expensive for me to be willing to invest in that at the moment, I would say. Medium Vorton projector, no one is selling that stuff. Median Vorton specialization, 829 million. Now this is a little bit more of a normal chart, right? Introduction, very expensive, but that's the not normal part. Went up to 2.5 billion, but then we've got this downward slope, this finding of a price range, and it's also below a billion ISK, 829. I still feel it's very expensive, but this feels like you could maybe try that, right? If you've got these anyways, it's okay. It's for Tech 2 as well. It's for the top end of what you can get out of the Vorton medium Vorton projector at this point. I would say that is still doable. But of course, if you don't have the base skill, then you get a little bit of a problem. Small Vorton projector is, I think, in the same boat. No one is selling that. Small Vorton specialization went up to 1.5 billion and is currently selling for 600 million ISK. Still, it's for a frigate. You're not gonna do that much with the frigate with the Vorton projector, so you could do it, but again, still super expensive. And then Vorton Arc Extension, one being sold at 5.3 billion ISK. Vorton Arc Guidance, no one is selling that. The price chart is showing 3 billion ISK as well. Vorton Power Amplification, 2 billion ISK, no sellers or next to no sellers. Vorton Projector Operation, also very expensive at a billion ISK, but you know, trades, we haven't seen any trades since August. And what does this one do? 2% bonus to rate of fire per skill level. It kind of feels like an important one to have as well. So for now, I would say that, yeah, the Edencom ships, I'll be honest right here, they start to feel like a little bit of an afterthought, like something that was tried, and where now they're saying, oh, let's hold off on that. Maybe that's not really what we want for the game, and that they're just not really iterating on that so much, and that they're happy with making that really something super niche, super rare, that only like the richest and most veteran player are going to invest in and actually actively fly. So that's my feeling on that. I may be wrong on it. Perhaps CCP has some longer term plans for all of this stuff, of course, but for now, yeah, Vorton projector skills, trying to get into those Edencom ships, very extremely expensive proposition. That's going to be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.